So let's meet our speaker. Dr. Holly Pittman is curator in the Penn Museum's Near East section and the Bock Family Professor in the Humanities in Penn's Department of the History of Art. Holly received her MA and PhD from Columbia University Department of Art History and Archaeology, writing a dissertation on the glazed steatite style of glyptic art, the structure and function of a glyptic style. She studied with Edith Parada and worked closely with Donald Hansen at the Institute of Fine Arts in New York. From her early days, curatorial work and excavation has been at the heart of Holly's interests. At the Met, she was deeply involved in the exhibition of Scythian gold, as well as in the reinstallations of the permanent collections and a number of temporary exhibitions. Closer to home, Holly was a major force in the creation of the Middle East galleries, something that Holly and I went through together, with all of the angst and happiness and success and celebration that entailed when it opened in 2018. I suspect many of you will have seen those galleries, and if you haven't, when you're in Philadelphia next, definitely come check them out. More recently, again, with the work at Lagash, Holly has assumed the role of project director, which is a much larger and more complicated task than anything she has undertaken before, but one that apparently she has happily assumed, and which she will tell us about, at least some aspects of it today. It's a big, complex project under the title, Modern Techniques for an Ancient Mesopotamian City. Holly, please.
Thank you, Steve, for that introduction. I'm very pleased to share with the Penn Museum audience the latest results of the Lagash Archaeological Project, putting emphasis on how we have leveraged various technologies to enhance our results and to define our research questions. I'll be focusing primarily on remote sensing technologies, given our time constraints, but in the Q&A, I'd be more than happy to elaborate on other technologies we're using for the project. Before turning to that discussion, let me first set the stage. Modern Tel al-Hiba, you see here outlined in red, ancient Lagash, is in the Dihar province of southern Iraq. It was the eponymous city of the Lagash city-state during the early dynastic period, which we date to somewhere between 2900 BC to 2360 BC. There we go. At the height of its power, the city-state of Lagash, which included this entire brown stain, consisted of three major sites: Girsu, modern Tello in the north, Lagash in the middle, and Negan, modern Tel Zirgal in the south. These cities were linked by the going to Negan canal, which branched off the lower Tigris River. During the third millennium, the delta of the Tigris was some 200 kilometers north of where it is today. Negan and the industrial site of Guaba sat on the mouth of the Gulf, having access to the open waters of the Gulf. There we go. The Lagash Archaeological Project, abbreviated as LAP, began in the spring of 2019. It's directed, as Steve said, by myself under the auspices of the Penn Museum at the University of Pennsylvania. We've had 6 seasons, all of which have had challenges, either the pandemic or regional instability. However, we have made substantial progress, and we return from the field at the end of November with a grasp of the city as a whole, thanks in large part to the remote sensing technologies that we're using. Before us, earlier work had been done at the site. First, the Germans had a 3-week season in 1987 under the direction of Robert Koldewey. In the 1950s, archaeologists, including Torkel Jakobsen, who you see pictured on the screen, undertook a survey of the region and collected brick fragments from the surface of al-Hiba, inscribed with the name of a major temple to the warrior god Ningirsu, the Bagara at Lagash. With this discovery, it was established with certainty that the ancient name of al-Hiba was not Girsu, but rather Lagash. Tello to the north, which had produced thousands of cuneiform tablets and major historical monuments, was certainly the ancient city of Girsu. With the historical geography of the city-state securely established, a new campaign of excavations was initiated by Donald Hansen, who was at the Institute of Fine Arts, in collaboration with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, with Vaughn Crawford, who you see in the lower right, as the project director. During 5 seasons from 1968 to 1978, Hansen uncovered 3 temple complexes and a royal workshop of the first dynasty of Lagash in areas A, B, C, and G, which he returned to in a final season in 1990. The only technology available to Hansen was a theodolite and a plane table, together with several cameras of different formats, including an invaluable Polaroid for daily photos in the field. As was normal in those days, Hansen chose to look for monumental architecture, and this led him to the highest points of the mound along the western north-south ridge. Hansen uncovered 2 temples, the Ibgal of Inanna, which you see a plan of here in Area A, and the Bagara of Ningirsu in Area B to the north. And in a 3rd season, he explored what looked like an oval wall, this wall right here, in Area G. Leaving the Western Ridge, he also went to a spot in the middle of the site that had evidence of burning on the surface. There he excavated a rabbit warren of rooms that you can see here that produced a Scrabble unit with tablets and seal impressions with names of kings, as well as workshops for copper and apparently also for gold and silver. To record the architecture, he made plans by setting up a datum point and then running a string with a line level and dropping a plumb bob to capture the horizontal and vertical locations of the points on the architecture. This is a laborious, exhausting process that produces an accurate but not precisely accurate plan of the uncovered remains. By the last season in 1990, Donald had a total station in the field. This is an instrument combined with the EDM technology with a theodolite, and it is used to measure angles. This made the mapping of Area G structures much more efficient. I was lucky to participate in that season, but shortly after we left the field, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and the first Gulf War began, extinguishing any ideas of returning. For the next decade or more, little progress was made to prepare the vast archive of records for publication. Sadly, this has been the fate of many excavations in the 20th century. In 2007, Donald died, and I inherited the archive with the understanding that I would prepare his results for publication. I worked on that project with graduate students for 10 years, and we're now in the final stages of publication with 1 volume out, another submitted for publication, and 2 others in the final stage of preparation. The reason why Donald could not prepare his raw data for publication was because it was all on paper, with absolutely no way to manage the vast quantity of information that he had collected without an army of assistants. At the Institute of Fine Arts, he did not have many graduate students who were archaeologically inclined. Luckily, over the years, I've had more than my share of such students, including Gabe Pizzorno, who is now a digital historian at Harvard. And in 2007, he agreed to build a relational database for al-Hiba in the FileMaker program. With that tool in place, we set about to digitize all of the the data assets in the archive, and then to do stratigraphic analysis using the relational database to embed all of the ceramics and other finds back into the original archaeological context. Simply the digitization of the archive took 3 years, with an army of work-study students trained to scan the photographs and paper records, transcribe the information into searchable Word files, code, enter, clean, and regularize the information about the ceramics and other finds. Once that was done, it took 7 graduate students, who all named here, years of study while they were at Penn to work with me to prepare the stratigraphy and the architecture and the finds for publication. In 2011, in collaboration with Dr. Tinney, he and I applied for and remarkably won a major grant from the university to build an open source database from scratch, which would free us from the constraints and the onerous annual levy of the proprietary FileMaker software. We hired a programmer, Robert Brandt, who over 2 years built an open source database. All of the al-Hiba data has been imported into that database and has been used to generate the final reports of the Hansen campaigns. The name of the database is TARA, which stands for the Toolkit for Archaeological Research and Analysis. It is a fully relational database, which is now freely available for use by any project needing a powerful relational database. That was our first foray into the realm of technology, and it is the backbone of the efforts that we are making today. As our work preparing the legacy results was coming to an end, and ISIS had been largely defeated, at least for now, or for then, international teams were beginning to return to Iraq. At the urging of the graduate students, I applied for a permit to return to Lagash, and much to my surprise, 4 weeks later, we had a 5-year permit, which was renewed in March 2023 for another 5 years. And so the story of LAP began. Oops, sorry. There we go. From the beginning, our research questions at Lagash have focused on the non-elite craft production sectors of the city. Through these questions, we seek to complement Hansen's work on elite and institutional remains by acquiring an understanding of the urban fabric in which a large population lived and flourished. For this work, we have focused our efforts in a 25-hectare zone in the southern part of the site, which we have labeled Area H. In 2019, we opened Trench 1 at the highest point in Area H, where dense ceramic production waste was concentrated. Here you can see Augusta McMahon, field director for that season, locating the first trench using an age-old method of tossing a rebar to mark the corner of the trench where it landed, a technology that goes back to the Paleolithic. Trench 1 exposed a ceramic production zone consisting of peanut-shaped kilns, which you can see here in this drone view, that are dated by the pottery to the period just before the consolidation of the first dynasty of Lagash under Urnanche, sometime around 2500 BCE, a period that is conventionally referred to as the late early dynastic 3A period. Lagash is an enormous site, more than 450 hectares. To tackle a site of that size, we have exploited a variety of technologies, including remote sensing technologies, in particular UAV drone-captured images, as well as magnetometry. So let's look at some of those technologies now. Maps are critically important to archaeologists and central to much archaeological research, regardless of scale, from individual structures or small artifact distributions all the way up to continent-wide investigations. GIS is an acronym for Geographic Information Systems. This powerful system permits structured management, analysis, and display of spatial data when processed through specialized computer software. The methods used in GIS were developed in the 19th century, but when the possibility for the digital capture of data for GIS developed in the 1970s and 80s, its potential was transformed. Only in the late 1990s were digital applications for GIS commercially available. Now GIS is central to almost everything that we do, but it's also central to everything that you and I do, not only in archaeology, but in our everyday life. At a minimum, GIS software permits the layering of different data, like sheets of acetate. Think of the map app on your phone and how you can change the background between maps and satellite imagery, or how you can turn on or off various data sets like traffic conditions or public transportation routes. GIS software is like that, only on steroids. Most, if not all, archaeological projects nowadays use GIS. We use it for planning of the locations of the trenches, which you see here. We use it for planning our magnetometry and surface surveys. We also use it for rendering the magnetometry data as magnetograms, those images that capture the magnetic signal. We use mobile GIS on tablets to direct our surface surveys and as references when field walking. We use it for rendering the surface survey data as heat maps. We import drone orthomosaics and overlap them with magnetometry. We import total station and GPS, or global positioning systems, data into our GIS of the site to plot the precise locations of samples and artifacts. We use GIS to trace the boundary of each individual stratigraphic unit. And because all this data are in the same coordinate system to the sub-centimeter accuracy, we can mix and match them however we see fit. Let me elaborate on the most important GIS-based technologies for our work at Lagash. While everyone on the team has basic competence in GIS, Dr. Paul Zimmerman, who you see here, is our remote sensing specialist. He keeps us up to date with the latest systems and coordinates the data from all of our distinct data streams. He and I work closely together with the field director, Sarah Pizzamente, our project manager, Zaid Al-Rawi, and our assistant project director, Reed Goodman, to make sure that the survey, remote sensing, and excavation results are all seamlessly transparent and integrated. Let's look at how we use drones or UAV unmanned aerial vehicles in our work. We use drones to assist in recording the surface of the mound. At the scale of the mound and its surrounding region, we use a larger drone, which allows us to cover a substantial area. In our case, we use a DJI Phantom 4 RTK, and with it we collect ortho photographs. Ortho photographs are geometrically corrected aerial images that are used to create accurate maps. These ortho photos are stitched together into orthomosaic images that capture the surface of the mound at any given moment. The drone maintains positional accuracy with an extra onboard global navigation satellite system receivers that communicate with this device here, which is a static DJI RTK2 base station in a process known as real-time kinematic positioning. RTK positioning ensures spatial control through communicating with the base station. This system can provide accuracy of approximately 1.5 centimeters. Paul creates flight plans on the drone's controller, which is this box that he holds here. These flight plans ensure proper overlap of source photos. They also allow these flights to be consistently repeated during the differing conditions on the ground. The photos are uploaded to an online service called Drone Deploy, where they are processed into orthomosaics, or into digital terrain models, or DTMs, which give the topographic rendering of the surface. We subscribe to the service, which we use year-round for the analysis of our data back home. To make our topographic map in 2021, Paul flew consecutive flights over 6 days across the entire site and stitched together the DTMs into a master terrain model, which you see here, from which he generated the new contour map. Our flight plans are generally flown at about 60 meters, take about 20 minutes to complete, and each one covers about 20 hectares. We refly the Area H flight plan multiple times each season, and sometimes multiple times a day, because we find that varying atmospheric conditions affect the visibility of the subsurface architecture, which appears as soil stains of various colors, depending on their moisture content. Here you see the same area being photographed at different times of day and with different environmental conditions. We found that the angle of the early morning, which you see here, casts harsh surface shadows that obscures those soil stains, and that midday sunlight, which we see here, yields the best results because the reduced contrast from vertical ambient lighting. We also found that the soil stains change day to day as the sun dries out after a rainfall, and that after a few days of a soaking rain, salt efflorescences reveal the outlines of subsurface mud brick quite clearly. And you can see here, after the rain, how features like the city wall, for example, which you can see here, really begin to pop out, and the city gate, which you can see faintly here in the afternoon, see more strongly at noontime, but after the rain is really when we begin to be able to see things very clearly. Another mode of UAV photography that we use is infrared thermography, IRT, thermography. This is a special purpose digital camera with a sensor that captures infrared radiation instead of visible light. Differential absorption and retention of heat by the different materials of the subsurface architecture are recorded as relatively warm or cold spots by the camera. This permits us, for example, to see buried mud brick walls because their heat retention is different from that of the surrounding mud. We have an FLIR boson camera that captures thermograms with a resolution of 640 by 512 pixels. A stabilizing gimbal mounts to the underside of our DJI Phantom 4 RTK drone, pointed directly downwards to capture a continuous video from which we extract frames that show interesting subsurface features. While we have had several challenges stabilizing the camera, we're gradually working out the kinks and beginning to get useful images as the one that you can see here on the right. What you are looking at is a comparison of a drone photo of an area in Area H just north of Trench 3. So here is Trench 3 that you can see here where we're excavating, right? And then this is the soil dump. This is a little wadi. And 3 days after, or 2.5 days after a quite soaking rain, the efflorescence from the salts really began coming to the surface. What you see here is a thermal photograph of the same area taken on the same day, basically. And you can see here the wadi, and this is the spoil heap. Here's the excavations. And what you can see in the thermograph is features that are not even as clearly visible in the efflorescent pictures. So here we're seeing a narrow alleyway with a blocked doorway, and probably we're seeing that there, but it's much clearer in the thermogram. Side-by-side testing has shown that the field of view captured by our camera's lens yields best results at 100 to 120 meters above the surface of the site. A wider angle lens would permit us to fly lower to the ground and perhaps capture greater detail in the same aerial extent. We're looking into whether it's worth such an investment to purchase this wider lens. The images that we capture are immensely informative, and combined with other remote sensing data, allow us to make very deliberate selections of where to excavate, where to scrape, where to put tests. With these technologies, we will be able to have a plan of the architecture beneath the surface, a result unthinkable by using only excavation. Under normal conditions, our testing also shows that thermographs captured just before sundown have the highest temperature contrast between buried materials. Our best imagery so far is what you're looking at now, is a couple days after that soaking rain at the hottest time of the day, early afternoon, where the differential evaporation cooling further enhances the contrast in our thermographs. Under these conditions, as you can see, architectural details such as doorways, block doorways that are invisible otherwise just pop right out. Another major application of drone photography that we use extensively at Lagash is photogrammetry, through which we record all excavation undertaken at the site. We use this in combination with still photography of all the important features uncovered through excavation. Technically, the recording technique is called structure from motion, SFM, photogrammetry. Specialized software creates 3D computer models by identifying individual features, corners and edges in particular, in multiple photographs and then calculating their spatial relations to each other. Absent any outside reference, these models have no scale or absolute orientation. To provide that information, we place markers called ground control points, or GCPs. You can see them here. And record their precise locations with the total station. These look like small bullet points on the surface of the excavation. A minimum of 3 GCPs are required to establish the model's scale and ground plane, but more GCPs can increase the accuracy of the finished photogrammetric model. Given enough photographs and well-placed GCPs, we can create models of our trenches with an accuracy of to 1 millimeter or less. Under the direction of Sarah Pizzamente, we excavate by strict stratigraphic units. As part of our documentation process, we create a photogrammetric model of each trench whenever a new stratigraphic unit is defined, and also anytime we fully remove one. Here are 5 photogrammetric captures of Trench 3, which some of you might remember is where the tavern was uncovered during our 4th and 5th season. This past season, we have dropped a deep sounding beneath the tavern, and much to our surprise, we uncovered a major pottery factory, much larger in scale than the small kilns found in the upper layers. We date this level on the basis of ceramics to somewhere around 2700 BC, a phase that is conventionally associated with the late early dynastic I period. What you're seeing here are 5 photogrammetric captures during the excavations this season. This is when we opened the trench, and then 3 different photogrammetries during 3 days in November. And then on November 9th, this was the last day in which we were excavating. This is the trench was closed at this point. With small DJI Mini or Mini 2 drones, we take 60 to 100 photographs from a height of 5 to 10 meters, covering the entire trench from multiple angles so that every surface and feature is captured in detail. The photographs are then processed with Agisoft Metashape to create 3D models you see here in these screen captures. The source photos, the Metashape projects, the 3D models, and the orthomosaics are all backed up to the project's file server according to naming conventions that we established in the field. The field director then creates a master Metashape project for each trench that merges all of the models created in a season, from which she can generate a time-lapse sequence, like the one that you're seeing here, of the progress of the excavation from which she can take measurements. This is a vital part of the quality control of the excavation and is useful when interpreting the results, and especially architectural phasing. What you're seeing here is one of the master Metashape projects for Trench 3 with the level of the tavern. So if you're familiar with that, you'll remember that here we've got the oven, and here we've got our refrigerator or zier. Over here were the shelves that were loaded with food, bowls full of food, and then benches in this open air eatery. Sorry. There. Each trench supervisor is required to fully document each stratigraphic unit, including a map that shows its location, any artifacts found in it, as well as the location of any samples taken from it. To do so, they import the 2D orthomosaic into GIS, similar to the one that you see here of Trench 3, and where these features are traced and annotated. Because of the consistent spatial control afforded by the GCPs, each orthomosaic overlays precisely, and the orthomosaics and annotations can be exposed like acetate transparencies. The other powerful remote sensing technology that we use at Lagash is magnetometry. The combination of drone photography and mapping and magnetometry are allowing us at last to accurately grasp the structure of the southern part of the city. In 2019, we used a two-sensor handheld Bartington magnetometer that we borrowed from Cambridge University to test the utility of the technique for investigating Lagash. Despite problems, this test made it obvious that magnetometry, together with drone imaging, combined with ground truthing, would gradually allow us to understand the structure of the city of Lagash as a whole, something that Donald could never have dreamed of accomplishing. Seeing how powerful a technique it is, we returned for excavation in the fall of 2022, having purchased a 3-sensor cart-mounted Sensys MX magnetometer system. And in 2024, we upgraded that cart to a 5-sensor array. Despite the changes in hardware, each season's magnetograms are very closely comparable, with features showing up nearly identically where those magnetograms overlap. On the left, you can see the results of magnetometry to date, which covers approximately 25 hectares captured over 3 seasons. We now estimate that we can do 20 hectares in a 6-week season. And so in someone's lifetime, we will be able to have magnetometry coverage of a great deal of the site. Magnetometers work by detecting minute variations in the Earth's magnetic field, caused by localized concentrations or depletions of iron-rich minerals. Multiple sensors can be used simultaneously to compute a differential between them. Magnetometry employing a multi-sensor configuration is called magnetic gradiometry, and is the method used at Lagash and at other archaeological sites because of its ability to detect smaller buried features. With our readings are taken every 10 centimeters and are recorded in a dedicated data collector. We collect data by walking the machinery This is Paul, and he has Bessie, and he is walking it in regular intervals back and forth across a 40 meter by 45 meter by 45 meter square unit. So here is the magnetometry grid. This is Paul walking the magnetometry. And here you can see in a drone photograph the tracks of this work, which are Paul's footsteps in between the wheels of the magnetometry. And you can see how straight a line that Paul can manage over a 45 meter square unit. This is truly a contemplative space because he can have no metal on him, so no music, no podcasts, no phone conversations. He is in his very own isolation tank. Because the site is very flat and has very little vegetation, traversing its surface in regular transects with the cart is relatively easy. Erosion and site deflation have left large expanses of roughly contemporary early dynastic architecture very close to the surface. This permits us to visualize the ancient urban structure in a holistic sense. The data are then cleaned and processed in GIS, where they are turned into grayscaled images called magnetograms. And you're seeing the composite magnetogram of Area H as of November of this year. By convention, magnetograms are usually shown with negative values in white and positive values in dark. At Lagash, we set those values to a range between -8 nanoteslas to +11 nanoteslas, which yields good visualization of the site's subsurface architecture and other features. Because magnetometry sensors are passive receptors, magnetometers measure the cumulative effect of all distortions, positive and negative, at the sensor. Therefore, a deeply buried but strongly magnetic feature may be more readily visible to the instrument than a weakly magnetic object that is just below the surface. Magnetograms, therefore, do not indicate depth. We must infer depth from a general knowledge of the site's archaeology or determine it through excavation. This makes magnetometry different from the active systems such as GPR or ground penetrating radar, for example, which generate a signal and read the response, from which features depths below the surface can be known. While this is also a powerful method, GPR has not produced results comparable to the magnetometry at any of the sites in southern Iraq. This is probably because of the distinct nature of the alluvial soils in the south. Magnetometry works well at Lagash because the site's soil matrix is essentially magnetically neutral. Two of the most common materials at Lagash, pottery and mud brick, create positive and negative signals, respectively, which can be readily seen in the magnetograms. The strong signal generated by iron-bearing stones and ferrous objects tends to drown out nearby readings. But fortunately, there are very few such materials at Lagash, so a minimal amount of post-processing is needed to generate clear magnetograms. Burning shows up with a strongly positive signal, which is particularly visible in this large building that you can see in this magnetogram. Suggesting that a monumental structure with heavy burning is to be found under the marks of flooding. So we probably have an ancient canal here, and there's a breach in the canal, and we have these rill patterns that are formed by uncontrolled flow of water. A test trench, several test trenches were dropped across this water feature. What we found are that more than a meter beneath the surface, we ran into this more monumental architecture. While the lighter lines, which you can see here, lots of architecture visible, are much higher and can be found just beneath the surface. Here you see the magnetogram of area H, as you can access it on either your phone, so this is your phone, or this is your iPad when you're on the site. As we walk on the site, so our location, this screen grab is, our location is here, precisely here, documented in the photograph, or here. It is amazing that when you're on the mound, that you can see exactly where you are in the neighborhood, even though you're walking on what appears to be a featureless site. This is several days after the rain, and the street here, 3-meter wide street, and the salt efflorescences really allow you to see things on the surface that you don't see in other conditions. Streets have a strong positive signal due to the high quantity of sherds. So here we are, this is that major street that we were just on. Due to the high quantity of potsherds that pave their surfaces. Mud brick walls have faint negative signal that is readily apparent, especially when it's next to a negative, next to a positive signal. So we've got here a wall bordering a street. But generally, these are less visible when there's no adjacent positive signal to see. Kilns and ovens. So here's a field of kilns that we can identify in the magnetometry, and this is trench 7 that we excavated this season, where these kilns were uncovered. So when fires, kilns and ovens are detectable by their size, shape, and presence of connection to very high magnetic highs and very low magnetic lows, far beyond what is found for regular pottery and mud brick. So when the fires were burned in these structures, iron particles in their mud walls aligned with the Earth's magnetic field, so that the highs are always to the south and the lows are always to the north. A large linear feature, this feature here, cuts through the southern portion of area H, the area H magnetogram. It is similar to the road that we see here, but wider and less intense. Our working hypothesis, which we will test with excavation, is that it is an ancient canal. We have identified streets of 3 orders of magnitude. There's the large street that we've walked along. There are these secondary streets which are perpendicular to the main street and are distributed at regular intervals along the main road. And we have excavated a secondary street in trench 4 and 6 here. You can see it, the excavation matches exactly the magnetometry. And then we have here even smaller alleyways. So here's a little smaller alleyway in the northern part of trench 3, and you can see a detail of it here. And so there are 3 orders of streets. All right, so let's go ahead. We've ground truth in addition to the kilns and the streets. We have also ground truth drains so that we can better interpret our magnetometry results. So literally hundreds of drains are visible on the site's surface, and you can see them here. They've been excavated. And these round, dark features that don't have negative around them is how they show up in the magnetogram. They're usually about 1 meter in diameter. The ceramics found in these drains indicate that they belong to the latest early dynastic III architecture that was at one time existing on the site. This latest architecture has almost entirely been erased through extensive water and wind erosion. And so what is left of these later levels is simply these drains that were dropped from architectural levels higher up. Many of these drains are parallel to the edges of larger streets. So you can see them here and here along the main street. But 2 drains were cut into this alleyway in Trench 3. This distribution suggests that the larger streets may have been founded at the beginning of the city in the earliest early dynastic or even earlier times, and continued to structure ancient Lagash for hundreds of years. But that the alleyways were less durable and could be decommissioned or moved easily depending on the architectural function of the area. The configuration of these major streets, in conjunction with differential distributions of surface artifacts, permits us to interrogate the spatial organization of ancient Lagash. We're currently analyzing Area H as having 3 distinct districts, one in the south of the canal, one in between the canal and the road, and one to the north of the large street. Each of these districts appears to be functionally distinct. We know we have ceramic production in District 1. We're quite confident that we've got stone production, stone tool production in District 2. We're not yet clear what kind of industries are being engaged in District 3. But we expect our current studies will enable us to refine this framework to finer spatial resolution with greater functional specificity. Let's look for a minute at what the combination of drone photography, magnetometry, walking survey, and excavation combined has told us about this corner of Lagash. The yellow and red lines on the magnetogram to the right were drawn by Elizabeth Stone from satellite imagery more than 2 decades ago. Her observations have in many cases been confirmed by our remote sensing results. Our project architect, Mark Marin-Webb, made the blue tracings on the basis of different orthomosaic images alongside the corresponding magnetograms. And through these blue tracing, he marks out walls, streets, and other architectural features, including this monumental buttressed wall at the site, at the south of the site, which is broken by a monumental gate, which is also buttressed, and we see the canal or walkway or both going through the canal into the hinterland of the site. This monumental wall, which certainly turns and goes to the east, yes. There seems to be a kind of moat-like feature, or at least water-laid feature, separating the wall from the immediate area outside of the city. Finally, let's return for a moment to the power of the combination of these remote sensing techniques. On the right, you see here. Yeah. On the right, you see a combination of the drone photo of Trench 3 here, right here, with the tavern and the pottery factory below. Overlaid on the drone photo is the thermal camera image and the tracings of outlines of walls in and around architectural complexes. So what we can see are four rectangular compounds aligned along a secondary road to the on their right. Each one of those rectangular compounds are approximately 500 meters square, which is precisely the size of our dig house, which you see here in Google Earth photographs. So this is the house that we live in, and this is our working space with our pottery yard and other activity areas. Up to 15 of us can live and work in that compound, considerably larger than a nuclear family house. This gives us an idea of how craft production communities of Lagash were organized in the period before the formation of the city-state, through the unification of the three cities under the control of newly established dynastic entity. If we pull out from the details of the compounds to the place where Area H fits in the city, we can begin to see the place of the southern quarter of the city within the larger organization of ED Lagash. We can be confident, we think, that the hypothetical canal, which you can see running here, leads from the city gate to Area A, which is where the Ibgal of Inanna was built the evidence is early dynastic 3, but it certainly must go back earlier. While the major street separating districts 1 and 2 heads directly to Area G, where another temple of unknown identification has been investigated by Donald Hansen. We know from the Amai texts from Girsu that the early dynastic queens made ritual visits to the temples of Lagash, arriving from the north by boat and on foot. Surely with more of these detailed examinations and exploration, we will be able to actually trace the route 5,000 years later. So I've taken much more time than I should have. We use many other technologies in our work, including geoarchaeology, soil science, dating technologies, laser drawing technologies, just to name a few. Perhaps on another occasion, we can elaborate the role that they play in our work. I'm very grateful to my team for this effort, and especially to Paul Zimmerman, who helped me greatly put this presentation together. We could not do any of this work without the support of our sponsors. And finally, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to our many Iraqi collaborators, from the representatives, from ESPA, to our dedicated workers, to our hosts in the village who take care of us, meeting our every need and bringing us joy every day. So with that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Holly. That was wonderful. Again, for the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or Q&A, and we'll get back. We'll ask them to Dr. Pittman. So, Holly, Bonnie is saying, thank you so much for an interesting and informative presentation. You spoke of many technological advances that have furthered your work. Do you have a wish list for additional advances, technological or otherwise, that would be helpful that aren't available yet?
Aha. Should I unshare my screen, or should I just speak?
It's up to you. You can unshare.
Okay.
That's fine.
Oh yeah. Okay. So people can see me.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've dreamed about was to get airborne magnetometry, which exists now, but is very, very, very expensive, and would be, I think, probably not the easiest technology to use in southern Iraq. But that's certainly one of the techniques that, you know, decades from now it'll become available in drone form that will make you know, for us to be able to cover this site will take 10 seasons. But if we had a drone that could do it as accurately, we could do it in a season. The other thing that we are working on is developing AI to help us interpret the magnetograms. And so we hired actually a young lady from the School of Historic Preservation who was working with us, and we got a URF grant to have her help us build an initial AI. And we were going to be ground truthing out in the field while she was you know, building this AI to apply to the magnetometry. But it turns out that Google hired her away from us, and that she didn't have a minute to spare on the AI. I think you can see that we have really become much more comfortable interpreting the signals that we're getting from the magnetometry and from the drone photography as we go through and you know, ground truth these different features. But AI will be a very powerful tool for Lagash and for all archaeology. I'm anticipating in probably the very, very near future, given how rapidly that technology is developing. So we really look forward to that as well.
Yeah. Holly, Aaron is asking about LiDAR. He said they may have missed it, but does LiDAR play a role in guiding your excavations? And if not, why?
Well, LiDAR, my understanding is that LiDAR is really useful in environments where you've got dense vegetation, right? And so in Mesoamerica and South America, LiDAR is used consistently in order to uncover Mayan ruins in deep jungle environments. But you can see we don't have any vegetation. And so we just need to, and I'm not sure that LiDAR would actually capture the subsurface architecture that we are able to see with the magnetometry. I'm not aware of any project in the South that is using LiDAR.
All right. Anonymous is asking, any idea on how they conducted funerals, or can you speak of possible cemeteries?
Well, we know a lot about funerals because we have the Royal Cemetery, right? Which is in our museum and which we display, and we, you know, show how those rituals work. We also know a lot about funerary rituals from the texts that we have of the same period. So Andrew Cohen did a really detailed study of the funerary rituals of the early dynastic period. Paul thinks, can you see these slides? No, you can't see the slides. Anyway.
No, we can't.
Yeah, so Paul thinks that
you can reshare your screen if you want.
That's what I'm doing here, right? Paul thinks that maybe here we have a cemetery over here. And he did magnetometry, little tiny bit of it. He's going out for a spring season, might look around even more. The reason that he felt that this could be a cemetery is that the there we go. There we are. This is this spot here. In his survey, this is the most intense of ceramic of places where intense ceramics were found, and very large fragments of ceramics were found. And that's the kind of thing that you would expect in a cemetery context. He also found, in walking over the mound, several human finger bones, and then there also seemed to be densities of artifacts. And so, you know, who knows? Some point, someday, we'll wander over there and take a peek.
Thank you. We also have Paul in the chat answering for us as well. So,
Okay.
you know, Paul was saying the
So
surface,
yeah,
the surface survey shows a very high hot spot for ceramics, including nearly complete vessels. And as you
right,
said, also found a human finger bone and a cylinder seal there.
right. Paul also answered about LiDAR. So why don't you
Yeah.
read that? 'Cause he
Yeah.
knows more.
And we can always invite Paul to come on if we'd like.
Well, for that other thing we're going to do next year, he'll certainly
There we
come on.
go. So Paul said in the chat for LiDAR that LiDAR doesn't really work for the excavations because the surface of the mound is very flat. The architecture that they see is visible because of soil stains, but there isn't any topography relief to them.
Right.
So excellent. Are there any other questions? Holly, what's the future? When you're going, you said Paul's going back out in the spring.
Well, so you know, we're committed, right? And so we're now splitting our work between 2 seasons, which is challenging in terms of raising money and everything. But we're going to have a spring season this spring. The field director for that season will be Steve Renette, who is a Penn alum and who's now at the University of Cambridge. And he's the one that really bashed through the legacy Area G study and did the study of the pottery. So he's going to go back to Area G, taking with him Zaid and Paul and members of the team that exists now, as well as people from Cambridge. So he'll have a spring season. Then we will go out again in the fall, in October, and we're planning, you know, barring hysterical disasters, a 2-month season, so that we can really make some serious headway, both on the collection of data, but also on our processing of that data in order to prepare it for publication. Because the one thing that I am determined to not let happen is that I'm not going to leave what Donald left to me, which is a huge mountain of data that is not published. So there's very strong emphasis now on getting out timely interim reports that, if not complete reports, really report on what it is that we've accomplished.
Yeah. Thank you. Erin is asking, can you please define the term ground truthing? And how does that add to your knowledge base?
Well, ground truthing means that you go, again, if we go back to the slides for a minute, if you bear with me.
Of course.
Do you see this one? Do you see my?
I see no, we're seeing your text, your lecture text.
Okay, sorry. All right, so let's try again. Here, share. Okay, so we have the magnetogram. So we've got this black and white picture. And say we had not done any excavation at all. What are we looking at? Right? So we don't really know what we're looking at. And so ground truthing means going actually to the site. So ground truthing this secondary road, which we see as a black image in the in the magnetogram, we ground truth that image by excavating trench 6 here, and you can see the street going right through it. And this trench is exactly located on the magnetogram. So it's through the excavation that we ground truth our interpretation of this black line as a street, right? So if we go to the drains, right, the ground truthing the drains. So all over the magnetograms are these pock marks, right? It looks like pimples or acne or something. And until we actually ground truthed them, we didn't know exactly what we were looking at. So in the first season, one of our team members, Petra Creamer, did a walking survey of the drains, right? And so where you have a yellow dot is where Petra, she put a GIS marker, GPS point where she found a drain. We didn't have the magnetometry. We didn't have anything. She was just working with the drains themselves. And so Paul and Petra worked together to create this overlay so that we can see that where the yellow dots are, in fact, 92% of the time correlate with these features that are identified on the surface as drains, right? So here is a drain, here's a drain, here's a drain. Those drains are on the surface because remember, they're coming from levels that are gone, right? And so ground truth, the presence of the drains. So ground truthing is really just taking the remote sensing information and going and checking it to make sure that our interpretation is correct or not.
Really interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much, Holly, for sharing your work with us. It's really fascinating.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, there's one more question that just popped up. So we'll handle this one more question.
Right.
Can you please explain the drains again? Are they for streets or buildings or homes? Would they have been connected with pipes?
Right. Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen again here. All right, so share. Okay. So the surface of Lagash is very flat, as we've said. And what has happened from the 3rd millennium BC until today is that probably 2 meters, I'm guessing, 2 meters or more of archaeological deposit has been eroded away, right? And so all that is left of those eroded away levels are drains that were in the upper levels that are either toilets or water, places where water was disposed of. So I'm going to go to another application here. Yeah, here. So trench 5, if we look at trench 5, we have some drains that are coming from above, right? And so those are drains that were toilets that were in the house of above what we have left now, but like all toilets are dug down into earlier levels. And so we find the remains of them in these earlier levels. So trench 5 has these 2, which certainly come from above, but it also has drains that belong to its level. And so we think here, and we may have a drain here that is a toilet, a sewer, right? That was used contemporaneously with this house, in the earlier part of the early dynastic period. So you have to imagine that the drains, it's like, imagine the soil pipe in your house, right? It goes from the third floor toilet down to the sewer beneath the house. And so all of the levels, you know, from the third floor down to the basement are gone, but what does remain is that soil pipe that's still buried in the ground. Is that clear?
Yeah, it is to me.
So these drains are not drains, horizontal drains that are like gutters. These are drains that are vertical drains, and their primary purpose was for wastes of various kinds.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you for sharing your work. It was a pleasure to hear about it. Thank you for everyone for tuning in tonight, and we do hope that you will join us next month.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.